Hi, my name is Dan, and this video is one in a series of videos that I'm doing on crafting systems in games with focus on the design of such systems, and it's part of a larger suite of videos that I'm doing on game design topics. And in this one, I'm going to give some design thoughts, which is something I tend to do in these sets of videos, some thinking about how your design choices potentially affect the player in particular. And in this one, I want to really talk about the fact that crafting should be and can be fun. So I think creating crafting systems can be fun in itself. I'm a sucker for a good crafting system in a game. I love my crafting. But I think it's possible to get too tied up with the process of creating your recipes and thinking about what you can create, and to forget that the purpose of creating the crafting system is for the player to have some fun with it. Okay, so what I want to really do mostly in this video is focus on what are the elements of crafting that people find fun, and there's quite a lot in there, and then I'm going to talk about one other little issue. So first of all, really obviously, making stuff is fun, and one of the ways that you can think about what things people find engaging and find fun is to think about what do people do for hobbies. So what will they choose to do in their spare time? Obviously, gaming, but there are a whole load of suite of other things that people do for their own entertainment, basically. And quite a lot of hobbies have crafting at the heart, and they're making things. So from things like making models out of matchsticks, or doing cross stitch, or uh, knitting, or carving things out of butter, or there's many hobbies that involve creation of objects, and creation of stuff is fundamentally appealing and satisfying for people. So think about this as you're making a crafting system, and how to kind of incorporate that, or how to make the most of that. Similarly, tinkering is fun. So I'm separating the idea of making from the idea of tinkering here, because I think there's actually two different kinds of creativity. There's the kind of creativity where you are given step-by-step instructions of how to create what you're after, and this, for example, would be like a cake. Following a cake recipe, you follow it to the letter, and you get a nice cake out at the end, and it's satisfying. Knitting a jumper from a knitting pattern, you've got all the instructions that you need. You're following instructions, and effectively, this is painted by numbers. And people do choose to do that as a fun thing to do, and I completely get it. I understand it. The other side of the coin on creativity is the tinkering side, which is where you're not actually told exactly what you're making, and you're experimenting as you go along. And some people might think of this as being the more creative side of creativity. So this is what happens when people write songs, or create novels, or do paintings that are of the landscape that's around them, rather than of something that's been specified for them to do. And there is more sides of creativity to this kind of thing. Crafting systems tend to veer more towards the making side than to the tinkering side of this equation. But it is possible to include elements of tinkering inside your crafting, and experimentation, and to see what works, see what happens if you try different combinations of things. Micromanagement is fun. There's all sorts of hobbies in which you can see that, but certainly in games. And one of the fun things I find about crafting is the idea of that high-end item, and then you've got some intermediary items. We'll talk about that in the next video, and a whole load of materials that you've got to get, and then maybe you're making a whole set of items, and trying to keep track of how many you've got and how many you need, and what the process is to get from A to B. And I have been known to create little spreadsheets in crafting games that are kind of external to the game, just to manage the materials that I need and work out how many more I need to go and gather. This kind of impinges on grinding as well, and I'll talk about the relationship between crafting and grinding in a later video. Um, Automation is fun. So not all games that have crafting have the concept of automation. Factorio is a great example of a game that is all about automating creation of stuff, and it's a mixture of crafting and making factories and sending things down conveyor belts, which is just so fascinating and satisfying in its own right. So making things that automate the process of making things can in itself be part of the fun. Progress is satisfying. Lots of RPGs use progress as a major driver for their players. And if you've got an RPG and you're building in the crafting system, it'd be reasonably common for that crafting system to have elements of progress in it. And often this is in the kind of domain of the different recipes that you've got. And as you progress through your crafting or through your mainstream game levels, as you might call them, you get access to more recipes as you go on. So it expands as you go through. That kind of progress in any area of a game can be satisfying. Achievement, of course, is satisfying. So progress and achievement are tied together in this sense. But actually, going through the whole process of managing all your materials to create that high-end item and then having created it, that's can be quite an achievement point. And so celebrating that with your player is a good thing to do. Right, so that's a look at the different bits of fun. There may be other bits that you can think of, things that are fun that impinge on crafting. And my encouragement to you is, as you're designing crafting systems, is to keep these things in mind. Not to get too carried away with the details of the crafting system. Of course, your crafting system is going to need those details, but remembering that this is something that is experienced by a player and thinking about how this plays out and ways to maximize the fun in these different areas. That's my encouragement to you. There is one last thing I want to mention in terms of game design thoughts in terms of crafting, which is that crafting affects storage. So I have another set of videos which is about inventories and inventory systems. And in that, I mentioned the fact that if you have a crafting system in your game, you need to take that into account with your inventory system and whatever storage options that you've got for items in games, because crafting multiplies up the number of items you're going to be dealing with, often considerably. So I don't need to go into that in detail, but I do think I needed to mention it. So that's some design thoughts on crafting systems in games, and that's it from me for now.